Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever and wherever you're watching or listening. This is the Stochastic NHL DFS Strategy Show, and I am your host, Josh Harris. Obviously, I'm not Josh. I have too much hair for that. No, I am Michael Clifford, a.k.a. Slim Cliffy. Josh is on daddy duty today. He's had a tough week, so he's not here with us today. He will be back on Saturday for the Saturday slate, which should be huge considering there's no NBA this weekend. It's the NBA All-Star break. So Josh will be back, but I'm here for today. We have a 12-game slate again here tonight. I believe on Tuesday it was 11, so NHL really packing these big days once again. Before we get too much further, just want to say thank you again to all the support that you guys have been giving us over these last couple months. Whether it's signing up through the affiliate link, which I'll drop into the chat right now. If you want to come join us, feel free to do so through that link in the chat. There's NHL, there's a big MMA card this weekend, obviously PGA, MLB isn't that far away, although it's a little bit too early for that, but there's a lot going on. So come join us here at Stochastic, but whether it's that or the super chats, sharing our videos, sharing our articles, whatever it is, you guys have really shown us the love over the last couple months. We certainly appreciate it. And we're going to try to keep that train rolling here right through to the end of the season. Want to shout out a couple winners from last night. We had 7-out-7 take down the hip check on DraftKings last night. He had Minnesota 1, Florida 3, Fleury in net. That's Red Spike in our Discord chat. So congrats to him. I guess he chopped, but I mean, we'll take chops. On 3-game slates that went the way they did last night with Winnipeg and San Jose combining for that one goal. So congrats to him. We also had Yellowbird in our Discord, Craft Beer Baller, take down the secondary hip check, I believe it was, Minnesota and Arizona last night for the showdown. So congrats to him. Congrats to you both on those takedowns. I noticed Hypnotoad finished third as well. He had a good night last night as well. He's had a few good nights in a row. So congrats to Toad. Congrats to everybody that did well last night. Hopefully we can do the same thing again here tonight. Let's not dilly-dally anymore. Let's get right to these games. Let's get to the first game that we have on the board here tonight. We have the Boston Bruins hosting the Seattle Kraken. We have Seattle with a 2.3 total, Boston with a 3.1 total. Jeremy Swayman going for Boston. Joey Daccord back in net for Seattle. Brad Marchand didn't skate at practice yesterday, but he should be back on the top line with David Pastrnak and Charlie Coyle. Tough matchup on the Seattle side. I mean, on the best of days, it's tough to stack Seattle. We talk about it over and over. I'm sure anybody that watches the show or just watches the NHL is very aware how Seattle runs their lines. You'll see a bunch of guys between 14 and 18 minutes on a given night, maybe 13 and 18 minutes. They had been giving their top power play a little bit more time. That doesn't seem to be as much the case, but it doesn't really matter. The power play is very good anyway. I'm not in on Seattle here. On a 12-game slate, I think there isn't much merit to really going to a team with a 2.3 total that spreads its ice time and his power play out as much as Seattle does. Also, I was looking at some data from a website called All Three Zones about the types of passes that players make. And if anybody's wondering why Matty Beniers is having a tough time producing this season, he's, I believe, 8th in increasing his pass rate to defensemen in the offensive zone. So Matty Beniers is one of the players, one of the forwards, who is passing more to his defenseman than anybody else in the league when compared to last year. And I know defensemen have to get more involved in the offense, but when they're the ones taking the shot, they're just low percentage shots, whether they result in deflections or rebounds or whatever. Running the offense like that is kind of tough. Same thing with Alex Wenberg. He's doing about the same. He's not a big producer anyway. So, I guess, if you want to one off like Evgeny Gord or Oliver Bjorkstrand, like those types of things, that's fine. But I have no interest in Seattle. No interest in Boston 2 either. Boston 1 is really the only thing that I have a little bit of interest in on this slate. You have Coyle, Marchand, and Pastrnak on the top line. 2 out of those 3 guys, Marchand and Pastrnak on the top power play unit. Not a lot of ownership coming in at 3%. when I see 3% and it's a David Pastrnak, Brad Marchand line, I kind of get a little bit excited. It's still a tough matchup against Seattle. Whatever issues Seattle has, they're still very, very good defensively. It's not a team that you want to typically stack often against. They don't take very many penalties either. One of the least penalized teams over the last 8 weeks. I guess going back to the Christmas break, only 2.7 minor penalties taken per game. The penalty kill has been getting worse, though. Fringe bottom 10 in that span. So I think there is some merit if you're playing 20 lineups, 50, 150 lineups, certainly to playing Boston 1. My single entry at 21,200, I think that's a little too steep on a 12-game slate where you have Colorado, you have Tampa Bay, you have the Toronto guys healthy again. You have a couple really good matchups for Vancouver and Pittsburgh and Calgary, and on and on and on it goes. I just don't think there's any need to jam Boston if you're playing a single entry here tonight. I don't think it's a bad play by any means. 9.5% top 2 stack against 3% ownership. I think they're fine. I just think for me personally, there are other expensive lines that I would rather go to. So Boston, not really on the menu for me today, and I guess neither is Seattle. So not a whole lot offensively that I'm looking at in this one. All right, let's move this along. Let's get to the Buffalo Sabres coming off their 7-0 pounding of the Los Angeles Kings. They're at home against Florida. Florida played last night. Florida won last night. I believe the final was 5-2. Florida has a 3.3 total. Buffalo has a 2.8 total. Florida more or less loaded their top line. That's what they've been doing recently with Carter Verhaeghe, Sam Reinhart, and Alexander Barkov. Second line with Matthew Tkachuk, Nick Cousins, Sam Bennett. It's kind of tough because it's one of those situations where you have all three guys on the top line, top power play unit, all that stuff. That Florida top line in its current iteration, really, really good numbers in a small-ish sample this year, a little under 100 minutes, 88 shot attempts and 3.5 expected goals per 60. They all played over 20 minutes last night, so this is a line that's going to get heavily used. There's not much ownership coming in on them either. 1.2% on that Florida top line. Buffalo has been much better defensively this season than they were last year. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, very good in net as well. Buffalo has been taking more penalties. That is the one thing that I think you can kind of hang your hat on with this Florida team is Buffalo is at 3.7 minor penalties taken per game since Christmas. That's over the league average of 3.5, and Florida tops in the league in drawing power plays per game in that span. So Florida might get a lot of power play time, and I think that's the out for that Barkov or Verhaeghe Reinhart line. But then you're stacking Florida and you're leaving Matt Tkachuk off. Matt Tkachuk has just been on an absolute tear basically since before Christmas, going back about 2 months now. So it's one of those situations like we used to talk about with Vancouver when Pius Suter was on the top power play unit. It's like, yeah, you can stack Vancouver, but do you want to leave Elias Pettersson off? It's kind of the same thing with Florida here. It's like, yes, you can stack Florida, no ownership on them, high event line, high offense line, all in the power play, all good things. But then you're leaving Matt Tkachuk off your stack. And I think if you're going to play Florida, I think I would kind of just turn it into like a power play stack. We get very expensive, but there's a lot of super cheap one-offs you can use to match with them. So I think that's the approach that I would take here tonight is that if you play Florida, that I would power play stack them. Now, power play stacking is obviously very volatile. You're in or you're out. They either go off or your night's done. It's not one of those situations where if you go with a 3-3 stack and one stack goes off and the other doesn't, maybe your defenseman and goalie can bring you along to a main cash or something. If you power play stack and they don't score, you're toast. So it's all about how much risk you want to take on here tonight. On the Buffalo side, I wrote up Dylan Cousins in the picks article today. Buffalo's an interesting team for this slate. They've effectively spread out across 3 lines now. You have Jordan Greenway. Pardon me. Jordan Greenway and Alex Tuch down on what would be the third line with Casey Middlestat, though it's not really a third line. Dylan Cousins with JJ Peterka and Zach Benson, and then Kyle Okposo still with Tage Thompson and Jeff Skinner on the top line. Now, what's interesting about this is they have the entire top line on one power play unit, but it's with Henry Jokiharju because Owen Bauer is injured. And then they have the entire third line on another power play unit, but that's the one with Rasmus Dahlin. So it seems like they're trying to even things out a little bit. And Florida does take a ton of penalties. They're up near 5 minor penalties taken per game since Christmas. That leads the league. Buffalo slightly above average in drawing power plays. They've changed up their power play a lot because it has been struggling most of this season. But I dropped a nugget in our chat, in our Discord earlier, that JJ Peterka has one of the highest 5-on-5 point rates in the league this season, like literally up there with guys like David Pastrnak and Nikita Kucherov. Him and Dylan Cousins have been very, very good together. What I wrote about in the picks article was that the line generates 42.6 shots and 3.2 goals per 60 minutes and over 130 minutes together. That is really, really high. Florida's on the back-to-back. Buffalo, we say it all the time. It's like every once in a while, kind of like that night against Los Angeles, they look like a legitimate playoff team, even though it looks like they're not going to get in. There's not a lot of ownership coming in on Buffalo, but that's because it's pretty much spread across 3 lines. But that Cousins, Peterka, Benson line, only 1.4%, and they're priced at $12,300, which means they're at a spot where they can be used as a filler, with your Tampa Bays, with your Colorados, with Boston that we just talked about, and so on and so forth. So Cousins, Peterka, Benson, I think makes a decent filler line here tonight. But overall, I have to say I am way more keen on playing Florida than I am Buffalo here tonight. All right, let's move this along. We have Los Angeles going into New Jersey. Los Angeles has a 3.2 total. I suspect after what happened to David Riddick on Tuesday night that Cam Talbot will be going tonight. New Jersey going back to Nico Dawes. He's had a couple pretty good games in a row, so they're just going to keep that rolling. The big news in this game is the return of Victor Arvidsson. It's not confirmed, but they did put Carl Grundstrom on long-term injured reserve and activated Arvidsson, so that would seem to indicate that Arvidsson will be back tonight. Arvidsson has missed the entire season with a back injury that he suffered in training camp. He's going to be on the second line with Phil Deneau and Trevor Moore. Now, that's a line that has played a lot together over the previous couple seasons. That's the old LA2 that we used to slam quite a bit because they generate a lot of shots. I wrote about Victor Arvidsson in the picks article. That line in the previous 2 seasons, over 1,000 minutes together, 36.6 shots, 3.3 expected goals, but only 2.8 actual goals per 60 minutes. They had some trouble finishing, and Victor Arvidsson is a guy that has some good goal seasons, but has had trouble finishing in a lot of points of his career. Trevor Moore, up until this season, was not a good finisher. And even Trevor Moore, 34 shots and only 1 goal in his last 10 games. So maybe he's kind of regressing back to his normal career mean. So what Victor Arvidsson looks like tonight is a little bit tough to say. Obviously, he's been out of action for over 4 months. First game back, going to be playing New Jersey. The good news is that, yes, Jonas Siegenthaler was skating with New Jersey this morning, but it was on, quote, the 4th pair, so it doesn't look like he'll be back. So New Jersey's still without their top pair. Their defense over the last month and a half without them is, the expected goals against is 30th in the league at 5-on-5. Goals against not that much better. Los Angeles is moving Kevin Fiala to the top line, though, and Fiala is another one of those players that I mentioned with Beniers that have been making a lot of passes to defensemen. Fiala had been doing the same thing, and I think that's kind of why you see his production down a little bit from where it should be. Hopefully playing with Kopitar and Byfield kind of fixes that, and it doesn't seem like they're going to be carrying a lot of ownership here tonight. Fiala, Kopitar, Byfield, 2% top 2 stack, 1.2% expected ownership. Like, what are we worried about from New Jersey? Like, the goaltender had a couple good games in a row. Like, that happens. Just look at David Riddick. He had like a good month, and then they got absolutely blown up by Buffalo on Tuesday night. Like, a couple games doesn't change how you should feel about the New Jersey goaltending. The Nico Hischier line, for as much offense as they've been providing, 2.6 expected goals against per 60. That's about league average, 3.2 actual goals against, as you'd expect for a team with goaltending that struggles. I'm excited to see Victor Arvidsson back. I think he's fine as a one-off because he's under 5K on DraftKings, and he's a guy that generates enough shot volume where when he's scoring, he'll probably be around 6K. But that Los Angeles line is only 16,000. They're perfectly correlated on the power play. We don't have a sample with Kevin Fiala there, but Quinn Byfield has been a really good playmaker this season, kind of like a disruptor almost. And I think that should leave Fiala a lot of chance to create against a New Jersey defense that has not been playing well. So I do like LA1 here tonight. There's a lot of mid-price lines that are going to go under owned because there are a lot of expensive lines on this slate. And it's just a big slate in general, so I wouldn't worry too much about ownership. But I like Fiala, Kopitar, and Byfield against the New Jersey team that has been struggling defensively. On the New Jersey side, I want to stay away from that Kopitar, Byfield, Fiala matchup. So I guess it would be New Jersey 2 that I would lean to, the Jack Hughes, Tyler Toffoli, Eric Halla line. They're not coming in with a whole lot of ownership either. 3.9%, 5.3% top 2 stack. Obviously, Cam Talbot in net for Los Angeles. He's been struggling. The defense has really just been struggling all around. And if Arvidsson's game's not up to scratch, that Hughes to Foley Hall line's not in a bad matchup, and they have pretty good offensive numbers. 81 shot attempts, 3.5 expected goals per 60 minutes. Jack Hughes, 24 shots in 4 games since he's returned. Tyler Toffoli, 16 shots. So those two guys, 40 shots in 4 games since Hughes returned. So I think if I'm playing New Jersey, it's the second line that I want to go to here. But I think the line that I like best in this game is Los Angeles 1. This should just be a fun game all around. I think there are multiple playable lines on both sides, but it's New Jersey 2, Los Angeles 1 that I'm leaning towards. All right. Another game that should carry a lot of interest. We have the Anaheim Ducks going into Ottawa. Anaheim has a 2.8 implied goal total. Ottawa has a 3.9 implied goal total. That's tied for the highest on the slate. And I think, coming off Anaheim's 5-0 loss in Montreal, I don't think that should be a big surprise to anybody. We saw the Habs top line especially just carve the Ducks apart, particularly on the power play. Now, I did write up an Anaheim line in the picks article today for this reason. Ottawa's not very good defensively themselves. I know they won some games. They're scoring goals great, but that doesn't mean that they're not giving up any. What I wrote about in that picks article was Ottawa is above the league average by minor penalties taken over their last 20 games. And that 20-game span has seen Ottawa 26th by expected goals against per 60. That's going back to Christmas, or I think just before Christmas, and dead last by actual goals against per 60 at 5-on-5. That Vetrano, McTavish, Troy Terry line, I guess we'll see what the lineups look like. I wouldn't be surprised if they change things after, they look terrible against Montreal. Not a lot of teams look terrible against the Habs. They certainly did. Maybe they changed things up. But Vetrano, McTavish, and Terry are not coming in with very much ownership here tonight. 3.2% ownership, 3.6% top 2 stack percentage. That's another one of those mid-price lines that I like. Up until the last game, Troy Terry had been on a pretty good heater of his own. Mason McTavish just returned from injury, so maybe he needed a little bit of time to get his legs under him. So Anaheim 2 is what I like from the Anaheim side. You get 2 out of the 3 guys on what would be their top power play unit. Anaheim is drawing a lot of power plays as well. 3.9 minor penalties drawn per game going back to Christmas. So they could get a fair amount of power play time here. I don't mind that Ducks line. It's the Anaheim line or the Ottawa side that we really should be looking towards, because we saw them have a big game against Columbus. Now they get a chance against an Anaheim team that has been improving defensively, but even their defensive improvements is still in the lower half of the league, over their last 20 games. So it hasn't been tremendous. They do take a lot of penalties. The 3rd most minor penalties taken per game going back to Christmas at 4.3. Ottawa above average by drawing power play opportunities per game. The Anaheim penalty kill dead last by shots against per minute while they're shorthanded. So not only do they take a lot of penalties, but they have a lot of trouble keeping pucks away from the goaltender. And they've given up, I think it's 18 power play goals against in their last 19 games. So a really good spot for the Ottawa power play. Tkachuk, Batherson, and Norris, anybody that watches this show knows how I feel about Josh Norris. but not a tremendous amount of ownership coming in on that top line, 8.1%. It's a little bit of negative leverage, but it's really not that bad. What I kind of like here, I think, is leaving Drake Batherson off the stack and putting Claude Giroux in. I wrote Claude Giroux up, again, in the picks article. I hate to keep referencing it, but it's free over at stokastic.com. Go check it out. Claude Giroux is second amongst the team's forwards in 5-on-5 shots per 60 this season. He's not a huge volume shooter, only 2.5 per game, but he has been regularly playing like 19, 20 minutes of late, as he has for a lot of the season. He is on the top power play unit. Drake Batherson isn't. So I don't mind the idea of leaving Batherson off and then putting Giroux on. Like, Giroux just plays a bunch of minutes anyway. And, in a tight game, if it's 4-3 or something like that, he'll be on with the empty net as well. So I guess turning it into a power play stack is what I kind of like best from the Ottawa side. But it is I can't believe I'm saying this. It is the Tkachuk Norris line that I do like best. If you want to go down and go for that cheap Ottawa 3 line, Pinto, Tarasenko, and Grieg, I think that's perfectly fine as well. You get Pinto on the top power play unit. Grieg has been playing exceptionally well. Tarasenko's a guy that you can just leave on the stack. They're cheap enough where if you're playing a $19,000, $20,000, $21,000 line, you can stack with them. So they're not quite filler status, but they're approaching that. The ownership's not that bad. Great matchup against the Anaheim depth. I just think I want to get as many pieces as the top power play as I can in a matchup where they could get a lot of power play opportunities. So Ottawa 1 for me. I also like the Vetrano, Terry, McTavish line from the Anaheim side. If you guys want to sign up for Stokastic, and with the NBA going on their All-Star break this weekend, it is the perfect time to do it. Should be some nice contests on Saturday, Sunday, Monday as well. I'll drop the link in the chat again for our affiliate link. Sign up through that link and you can get a week of NHL. You can get a month of NHL. You get all the stuff that we show here on the show. Obviously, the top stacks tool is the one that we reference the most. We have them for both DraftKings and FanDuel, but we have individual player ownership. We have projections for FanDuel and Yahoo, and then we have the stats broken down by goalies and skaters. You get access to the Discord as well. So a whole lot of value, and it's the perfect time to join because, like I said, with the NBA All-Star break, starting tomorrow, basically, there should be some really good NHL contests this weekend. So hit up that link that we dropped in the chat and come support us if you can. The water's warm. It's a great time. I love this time of year in the NHL, even as some teams seem to pretty much be giving up. So click that link. Come join us. Lots of winning going on, as we showed at the top of the show, and hopefully we can help anybody else win here over the final couple months of the season. All right. I was kind of hoping Josh would be on the show today because we have the Josh and Cliffy Bowl going on tonight. The Montreal Canadiens, 2.4 implied goal total. They're going into New York to face the Rangers. The Rangers have a 3.6 implied goal total. You have Sam Montembeault in net for Montreal. He's had a really strong season behind a weak defensive team. Jonathan Quick getting started for the Rangers. He's not wrestled away the starting job from Igor Shesterkin, but until Quick stops playing poorly, it's kind of tough to take him out of the net. So Jonathan Quick, especially in an easy matchup against the Habs, he'll be starting for the Rangers. Now, Brendan Gallagher is back from Montreal. Not sure exactly where he's going to slot in. The most sense to me would be in Josh Roy's spot on the third line. That would kind of suck, though, because Roy and Armia have actually played pretty well together in a small sample. 3 expected goals for, 2.5 against, in over 65 minutes together. Joel Armia has 30 shots in his last 10 games. In fact, Joel Armia has at least 2 shots on goal in 11 straight games. That line has been doing a little bit of work, but we don't know where he's going to slot in. But it's not, the only line that matters is the Montreal top line. Anyway, Caulfield, Suzuki, Slafkovsky. 1.3% ownership, 2.5% top 2 stack. I don't hate the idea of using them. Here's the problem that I'm running into is the Rangers have been getting more and more disciplined as the season's gone on. They're down to 2.8 minor penalties taken per game since Christmas. It's the second fewest in the league. The only team lower is Seattle. And Montreal, for all the offense they provided lately, a lot of it has been because of the power play. And without that power play, without getting power play opportunities, it's going to be tough to score. So I don't mind using them because there's not going to be much ownership on them. But I think the time to use them was probably on Tuesday, even at their crazy ownership. I'm not so keen on the Habs here. I am much more keen on the Rangers side. In fact, I did write up, again, there's that picks article. I did write up Mika Zibanejad in the picks article today. Now, what I mentioned is that his shot rate is a 7-year low, but he has 21 power play points in 52 games this season. It's top 25 in the league. His shot attempts per 60 on the power play are also top 25 in the league amongst all forwards, and it's equal or higher than Nathan McKinnon and Austin Matthews. Now, I bring that up because Montreal is a team that is taking a lot of penalties. They're at 4 minor penalties taken per game since Christmas. It's the 5th most in the league. And fourth most on the slate behind Florida, Anaheim, Boston, and of course now Montreal. The Rangers, they've been changing around their power play a little bit at times because it has been on a little bit of a slide. But for like the first 40 games of the season, it was really, really good. What I also mentioned in that picks article is, good old Blake Wheeler in 286 minutes with Blake Wheeler on the top line. 32.9 shots and 3.5 goals per 60 minutes. Without him, that goes down to 28.7 shots and 2.5 goals. So he's been a difference maker for them at 5-on-5 offensively anyway. And they've taken them out of top line matchups. They've been getting more second and third line matchups over the last few weeks. And if you're not going to be going out against the Montreal top line, there's really not a lot to worry about defensively from their second and third lines, even with Brendan Gallagher back. So I think both Rangers lines are perfectly playable here, but this top line, only 3% ownership, 3.9% top 2 stack. Obviously, it's a lot lower than the Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere line that has been so good basically this entire season, but they're a lot cheaper. They're a mid-price line at $17,400, and that Rangers second line kind of going through it right now. The last 4 weeks, 115 minutes together for Panarin, Trocheck, and Lafreniere. Only 2.7 expected goals for, 2.1 actual goals for. They're missing the net a lot on their shots. Only 40% of their shot attempts are on net. Panarin, only 23 shots in his last 10 games. I still think they're a very good line. That's just kind of going through it a little bit right now. But with the Rangers, Kreider, Zibanejad, Wheeler line that much cheaper and playing pretty well with Wheeler there, and a pretty good power play matchup. I think it's Kreider, Zibanejad, and Wheeler that I like best in this game, factoring in ownership and price and all that. If you want to leave Wheeler off and put in Panarin or put in Trocheck to get more of a power play stack going, I think that's perfectly fine. But that Kreider, Zibanejad, Wheeler line is another one of those mid-price lines that I really do like here today. So Kreider, Zibanejad, and Wheeler is what I like best in this game. And then the Rangers' second line. I think the Rangers' third line, I don't think I would full stack them, the Brodzinski, Kakko, Cooley line, but they have been good together this season. Maybe against in an easy matchup or whatever against the Habs, they might get a little bit of more ice time. Only 50 minutes together, but 60 shot attempts, 3.6 expected goals per 60 in those 50 minutes together. It's pretty good. I'd probably do like a Kakko, Cooley 2-man. Jimmy Vesey gets a lot of empty net time, so maybe you want to even do like a Vesey one-off. I can't believe I'm saying that. So I do think there is a lot to like just across this Rangers lineup, but it is the Kreider, Zibanejad, Wheeler line that I like best in this particular matchup. All right, I need a little bit of a water break here because this next game is, they're all important games for one reason or another, but this next game is probably one of the most important on the slate. We have the Colorado Avalanche. They're going into Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay has a 3.4 implied goal total. The Colorado Avalanche also have a 3.4 implied goal total. So while neither are amongst the top for implied goal totals, that goes to Ottawa, and I believe Vancouver is up there as well. Edmonton certainly. But they're both at 3.4, which means that we're expecting goals on both sides here. Tampa made one is running back basically the same 5-on-5 lines, but they did change up the power play a little bit. They've taken Nick Paul off, and they put Anthony Cirelli on. That's important for this matchup for two reasons. One, Colorado's penalty kill bottom 10 in the league over the last 20 games. In fact, over the last 20 games, if you look at Colorado's goals against, it's also bottom 10. The reason they've been winning is because the top line just keeps thrashing the opponents. And it seems like, McKinnon, Rantanen, and whomever combined for like 4 goals a game. Arturi Lehkonen had a 4-point game recently. So they're basically outscoring their defensive problems right now. 3.7 minor penalties taken per game for Colorado. That's above average over their last 20 games. Tampa Bay power play, I think, should be better with Cirelli. Nick Paul's not that bad around the net, but obviously they felt like they wanted to change things up. The problem with stacking Tampa is just their price. $23,400 is a hefty price on any slate, and it's the most expensive line that we have here, even more expensive than Edmonton. So it makes them tough to stack, but I do think it's a good matchup for them, especially because, for two reasons. One, Logan O'Connor is going to be out for Colorado, and he's been one of the best two-way players Colorado has had this season. And the other is Justin Annunen starting for Colorado. I always think of that Dumb and Dumber joke, the annual. Justin Annunen starts for Colorado. He's not been good this season. They want to give Georgiev a little bit of time off, but 886 save percentage in Annunen's brief appearances this season. No goaltending concerns to worry about on the Colorado side if you're Tampa Bay. Colorado does take their fair share of penalties. Their penalty kill has not been good. It's only 6% on that top Tampa Bay line. I think they're certainly in play. With Anthony Cirelli moving to the top power play unit, though, I don't hate the idea of doing like a Kucherov Cirelli Stamkos stack if you want to get things a little bit cheaper. Kucherov point Cirelli, something like that. Anthony Cirelli is just a really good player. That line with Brandon Hagel, Nick Paul, not tremendous offensively, but they do well controlling the play. Should get a lot of ice time against Nathan McKinnon here tonight at 5-on-5. So I don't hate the idea of leaving one of the top line Tampa Bay guys off, not Kucherov. He's the guy that stays in no matter what, but leaving one of Pointer Stamkos off and putting in Cirelli instead if you want to make it a little bit cheaper. I really do like the Tampa side here. I'm not as in on the Colorado side because, like I said, that Hagel, Cirelli, Nick Paul line has been really good defensively. 1.9 expected goals against, 49 shot attempts against per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. That's really good defensive work. Now, obviously, Colorado can torch anybody, but I will note that the 3.2 expected goals for the top line with Jonathan Drouin there since Christmas, like that's really good, but it's not super elite. Like it's not like Edmonton 1 or anything like that. 3.7 actual goals. That's, really good, but it's not amongst like the super hyper elite. So I think if I have to pick between one and the other, I'm picking the Tampa Bay top line in this game. Colorado's might be a little bit higher owned at 8.8% because they are a little bit cheaper. But in what seems like a fairly even matchup, I'll go with the home side and the team with the penalty kill that's not struggling. So Tampa 1 for me in this matchup. I think Anthony Cirelli makes a nice one-off. Brandon Hagel's on a 7-game point streak. Again, one of probably the most underrated player in the league. I think even though he's not on the top power play unit, he's fine to one-off as well. That Colorado top line certainly does like to get into a track meet at times. But it is Tampa 1 that I like in this game by quite a bit. So Tampa 1, then Colorado 1. I think Tampa 2 is fine, but Nick Paul doesn't really do a whole lot of 5-on-5. So if I do that, probably just a Cirelli Hagel 2-man. And if I get to a Cirelli Hagel 2-man, I'm probably just going to end up playing Tampa 1. So Tampa 1 for me over Colorado 1 in that matchup. All right. The Philadelphia Fighting Flyers, 2.7 implied goal total. They're going into Toronto. Toronto has a 3.3 implied goal total. Samuel Ersson in net for the Flyers. Ilya Samsonov in net for Toronto. Toronto was missing some guys in their last game. they're expected to all be back. Mitch Marner and, Nylander, Tavares, all those guys. Or Nylander played. Mitch Marner and Tavares especially going to be back in the lineup. Obviously, they're still without Morgan Riley because of his suspension. Toronto, this is not an easy matchup for the Leafs. And when I look at their prices and when I look at their ownership, I'm like, do I really want to play them? 5% on the top line, 6.9% on the second line. I think individually you'll see, obviously Matthews gets a lot of ownership. But, Matthews is going to be going out against that Philly top line. The Philly top line with Tippett, Couturier, and Konechny, only 2.3 expected goals against per 60 minutes of 5-on-5. Now, Tippett missed practice yesterday, but he did skate this morning. So it seems like it really was just a maintenance thing. He'll be good to go. Sean Couturier looks like he was taken off the top power play unit for Morgan Frost. So you only get 2 out of the 3 guys on that Philly top line on the top power play unit. But it is the Philly side that I like better. Like Toronto, a lot of their value has been coming from the power play, and they don't have Morgan Riley, and this is a very bad power play matchup against a Philly team that has had a really good penalty kill basically all season. So I'm not in so much on Toronto here. There's $19,000-ish lines that I like elsewhere that I'll talk about later on in the show. So I'm not in so much on the Leafs. Austin Matthews always makes a fine one-off, especially on a slate this big. You want a one-off Willie Nylander, I think that's fine as well. It seems like he's slowed down, but he's still at 3.5 shots with 5 goals in his last 10 games. So he's still doing just fine. It is the Philly side that I do like better here. I wrote up Jamie Drysdale in the picks article. The reason that I did that is because the Flyers have been drawing a lot of power play opportunities. In fact, going back to Christmas, they've drawn tied for the 3rd most minor penalties per game at 4.1 per game. And the Toronto penalty kill has just been bad for a while now. Like we're talking like 20 to 25 games of a bottom 10 penalty kill. Now their saving grace is that Toronto doesn't take a lot of penalties, but maybe Philly can draw some out of them. We know they like to play rough, maybe a little bit of rugged, maybe kind of take them, make Toronto take a few stupid penalties here. The Flyers power play. The Phillies are going to be playing pretty soon anyway. Flyers power play has generally been very bad this season, but at least they're loading up all their top forwards on the top power play unit. Now, Philly 1 is coming in with only 4.2% ownership, 6.1% top 2 stack. No issue using them. Konechny and Tippett are their 2 best offensive players. If you want to make an argument for Joel Farabee, that's fine. But I think it's Konechny and Tippett. So no issue using them. But the Toronto top line has been really good defensively, basically all season with Nyes and Marner there. But just going back to January 1st, 2.1 expected goals against per 60 in their last 140 minutes together. That's the matchup Couturier and company will probably see. So not so stoked about that matchup. So I think it's Philly 2 that I kind of like here. They're not coming in with a lot of ownership either, 1.7%, 15,500. So a cheap-ish mid-priced line. Farabee and Frost, both on the top power play unit. I dropped in our chat, our Discord earlier today. Joel Farabee, over the last 3.5 seasons, his primary points rate of 5-on-5 is up there with guys like Nylander and Alexander Barkov, higher than Travis Konechny. It's actually crazy how productive he's been quietly, and it's because he typically doesn't get a lot of ice time. But he's top 6. He's top power play, should get his ice time. I like Philly 2 here in this matchup as one of those mid-price lines to consider because there are a lot of them that aren't getting a lot of ownership. I hate stacking the Flyers without Konechny and Tippett, but I think the matchup dictates that. So what I like best in this game is Philly 2. I don't think this is a game where I want to get the Toronto guys in. I think they make fine one-offs. Like I said, one-off Matthews, one-off Nylander, that type of thing. I just don't think I'm stacking the Leafs in this on this particular slate. All right, moving along, we got the Dallas Stars. They're going into Nashville. Dallas is going to be starting Jake Ottinger. Nashville probably going to UC Saros. Dallas has a 3.3 total. Nashville has a 2.8 total. Nashville did change around their lines a little bit. They put Tommy Novak and Cody Glass with Colton Sissons, but Like we say every show, other than the Nashville top line, you cannot rely on any combination from the Nashville second, third, and fourth line staying together. So, looking to them for those filler stacks. And what's really not a bad matchup against the middle six from Dallas, I think is kind of tough. I think Glass and Novak can make a decent two-man. Glass and Novak, 73 shot attempts, 2.7 expected goals in limited time together this season. Tommy Novak, I think, is the best offensive player they have that's not on the top line. Cody Glass is also getting top power play minutes. They took off Gus Nyquist, put on Tyson Barrie, but left Cody Glass. So he's getting top power play minutes. Tommy Novak is very productive on a per minute basis if he can ever get some ice time. I think a two-man there makes sense. But it is Nashville 1. Like if I'm full stacking, it's Nashville 1 that I'm considering now. Philip Forsberg didn't have a very good game on Tuesday when we recommended him. 2 shots and no points. Ryan O'Reilly had a power play goal. Ryan O'Reilly has 12 power play goals this season, is tied for third in the league for most power play goals. And the Dallas penalty kill has been very, very bad. Going back all the way to Christmas, this Dallas penalty kill, third most shots against per 60 minutes while on the PK, fifth most goals against while on the PK. So you get Forsberg and O'Reilly on the top power play unit. If you want to take off Nyquist and put in Glass, I think that's fine. Leave off Nyquist and just put on Tyson Barrie, Roman Josi on the blue line. I think that's fine too. They're going to be going out against the Dallas top line a fair bit. The Dallas top line has been playing better, but the defensive numbers by expected goals against still around league average since January 1st. So it's not a brutal matchup. I don't mind Nashville 1 here. They are one of those like 18 to 20K lines that I was talking about that I didn't like Toronto for, that I do like Nashville for. So despite that Novak Glass two-man looking kind of appealing, I think it's Nashville 1 that I like best. I want to get pieces of the top power play in what is not a bad power play matchup here for Nashville. Nashville also at 3.6 minor penalties drawn per game. Going back to Christmas, that's above the league average, so they could get their fair share of time against a penalty kill that has really been going through it for a while now. So I do like Nashville 1. They are one of the not quite super expensive lines. They're not quite up to Colorado and Tampa Bay. They're, the next tier down. They are in that group that I like in that mix. On the Dallas side, still no Evgeny Dadonov, so Ty Dellandrea is still on the third line. They're going to run back the same top 6 that they've had. This isn't really a great matchup for the Dallas top line. Now, the Dallas top line is not getting very much ownership. The Pavelski, Hintz, Robertson line only coming in around 6.8%, 6.2% top 2 stack percentage. That's perfectly fine. Nashville's penalty kill is not that great, and it's a perfectly correlated line on the power play. So I don't mind them for that reason. And the other reason is the Nashville top line has been very good offensively, but they've also had their issues defensively of late as well. 2.8 expected goals against per 60 since January 1st. That's a span of 165 minutes for them. So it's not a brutal matchup for Dallas 1. They are another one of those mid-priced-ish lines that I like here, but they're not near the top of my priority list. Dallas 2 is where things kind of get interesting. They are at 2.5 expected goals, but 3.9 actual goals per 60. Going back to January 1st, earlier in the show, I talked about Matty Beniers increasing his passes to defensemen. Matt Duchene has gone the complete other way since leaving Nashville. He makes fewer passes to the defenseman. He's looking for more seam passes, more passes from behind the net, those types of things. And I think that's what's driving high shooting percentages for basically the entire line, basically all season. I'm not super worried about any defensive matchups from the Nashville middle 6, like Novak and Glass. Really good offensive numbers, but bad defensive numbers together. I'm not worried about the third and fourth lines. Dallas 2, I think, makes a nice fillery type stack here. Only 1.2% ownership, 0.8% top 2 stack. So I have no problem playing Dallas 1 because they are perfectly correlated. It's a decent power play matchup, and they do have a 3.3 total. I just think I want to take advantage of what is some fairly weak middle 6 for Nashville and go with Seguin, Marchment, and Duchesne. But it is the Nashville top line that I do like best in this game overall. Coming up this weekend, as I mentioned a couple times, there's no NBA, so NHL contests should be pretty filled up, pretty big. That doesn't always happen. There's also are going to be some good MMA contests. I believe it's UFC 298, if my memory serves right. Volkanovski versus Topuria. Josh is going to have a video at some point on his Twitter at JRH002DFS if you want to go follow him. He'll have his thoughts on the slate on his Twitter, so go check out his Twitter. If you want to join for this weekend for the big NHL contest, for the MMA, whatever it is, I just dropped the affiliate link in chat again. Just click through that. Come join us for a week. Come join us for a month. See what we're all about here at Stokastic. It should be a big weekend of sports, even though NFL is over and NBA is going to be on their break. Between NHL and MMA, there's a whole lot going on. So click through that link. Come on here and join us. Make sure you check out Josh's Twitter at JRH002DFS to see what he has to say about the fights this weekend. All right, we got 4 games left to go to. They are some, as Josh would say, some spicy meatballs. We have Edmonton with a 3.7 implied goal total. They're going into St. Louis. St. Louis has a 2.8 implied goal total. One small change for Edmonton. They are moving Dylan Holloway to the second line in place of Corey Perry. I did write up that Edmonton second line in the picks article today because this isn't necessarily a good power play matchup for Edmonton. St. Louis penalty kill is average, but they don't take a lot of penalties, 2.9 minor penalties taken per game over the last 6 weeks. That's about where they've been basically the entire season. Fourth fewest minor penalties taken in that span, just behind the Rangers and the Kraken that we talked about earlier. Now, obviously, Edmonton's good enough to torch anybody at 5-on-5. They scored 8 5-on-5 goals against Detroit on Tuesday night, so they don't necessarily need the power play to get there, but I don't think you can rely on them scoring 8 goals at 5-on-5 every single game, only when they play the Detroit Red Wings, most overrated team. Edmonton is very much in play here. The top line, Connor McDavid had those 6 points, now coming in with a lot of ownership, under 5%. I do like the second line, though. Dylan Holloway, his shot rate has improved. I was looking over the last month. He's up to about 13.5 shot attempts per 60 at 5-on-5. That's about league average, which might seem like a slap in, one of those backhanded compliments. But you just need to be able to shoot a little bit when you play on a line with Leon Draisaitl, and they're going to avoid that St. Louis top line matchup. And when I wrote up the Edmonton second line in the picks article today, the note that I made was that St. Louis's top line off the ice over the last 20 games, 20% more expected goals at 47% more actual goals against. Now, the actual goals against haven't been horrific, but that's because Jordan Binnington and to a lesser extent Joel Hofer have been playing very, very well. Cannot rely on them to put up 940, 950 save percentages every single night. So I do like Edmonton too here as one of those mid-price stacks. A few games ago, Evander Kane had a hat trick when the rest of the lineup didn't do a whole lot. They can do it. And this is one of those matchups where they avoid a shutdown matchup, and it's not necessarily a great power play matchup. So I'll never say don't play Connor McDavid. Like, this isn't one of those instances at all. I just think looking at this specific matchup that there is some sense in going to Edmonton too. Now, what concerns me is that the ownership has been going up through the day. The ownership started at about 2.6%, if I'm not mistaken. Then it got up over 3%. Now it's nearly 4%. Seems like more and more people are going to be in on Edmonton. That's a little bit worrisome, but I still think they're perfectly fine. Obviously, Edmonton won perfectly fine to use. I just think I like the Edmonton 2 side, 3.7 total, even in a bad power play matchup. You can't ignore that. St. Louis side is where things get a little bit interesting. The St. Louis top line not coming in with any ownership whatsoever, 0.4% expected ownership against a 3.3% top two stack. They're kind of in that situation that Detroit was in the other night, in fact, when Detroit got their brains beat in. Alex DeBrincat scored a couple goals. The rest of the line didn't do a whole lot. But Detroit scored 4 goals on them, and that was on the road. Here, St. Louis is at home. Edmonton penalty kill, 908 save percentage since Christmas. That's a little bit high. St. Louis above average by drawing power play opportunities per game. St. Louis giving up 3.7 minor penalties per game going back to Christmas. Not a terrible power play spot for St. Louis. I don't think I would get there in single entry, but I think I prefer playing this St. Louis line than I would to playing either of the Toronto lines that we talked about. They are one of those 19K-ish lines that I do prefer over those St. Louis lines. So, Nashville's one of them. St. Louis is another. So don't mind St. Louis 1, but I certainly like the Edmonton side here better. Edmonton 2 for me personally, but either of those lines, perfectly fine to go with here tonight. All right. This next game is absolutely crazy. We have the Pittsburgh Penguins going into Chicago. Pittsburgh has a 3.2 implied goal total. Chicago is at 2.3. I imagine since I came on the show that 2.3 has gone up because the big news of the slate is that Connor Bedard is going to be back. There were some rumors that he was going to try to get some clearance from the doctor for this weekend or whatever, but he'll be back here tonight. He's been out since the start of January with that broken jaw. So he's been out about 6 weeks. I believe the initial timeline was 6 to 8 weeks, so he's on the low end of that, but it looks like Connor Bedard is ready to go. Now, what the lines look like kind of remains to be seen. Obviously, we can't go by anything they've been doing recently because Bedard has not been in the lineup. Yesterday, I did notice that they were running a line of Donato, Kurashev, and Tyler Johnson in their practice, which is interesting because right before Bedard got hurt, the top line was Bedard, Kurashev, and Donato. So it seemed like Bedard might just slide into that top line role with Kurashev, with Ryan Donato. Now, that's not a line that had a lot of ice time together this season. Bedard and Kurashev played a lot together, but Bedard, Kurashev, and Donato did not. In a small sample, but that's all we have to go by, a little over 40 minutes, 58 shot attempts, 3 expected goals per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. That's actually pretty good. Whether you want to play Bedard in his first game back here tonight, I'll kind of leave that up to you guys. I feel it's not quite the Victor Arvidsson thing. Victor Arvidsson, he's an older player. It was a back injury. He's missed over 4 months. Connor Bedard, teenager, broken jaw. So he's been able to skate basically since the first week that he broke his jaw. He's been skating. It's just that he hasn't been able to take contact until this week in practice. So he should kind of have his legs under him. He's not that expensive at $6,300. Him and Kurashev probably going to be on the top power play unit together. It's a double center stack if you want to use them, but I think they're perfectly fine to use here tonight. We saw Pittsburgh kind of get lit up. They'll avoid the Sidney Crosby matchup because they will use Jason Dickinson in that shutdown role. So they'll get the second and third line matchups, which might not be the blessing that we think because, since they added Jesse Puljujarvi, that third line, Puljujarvi was up with Malkin last night, but the third line had been very good defensively. The second line hadn't been bad. Problem is we don't know exactly what the Pittsburgh lineup is going to look like. Jake Gensel was hurt last night. I believe he left the game with a little over 10 minutes left, didn't come back. We're not going to find out if he's going to play until, a few hours from now. They moved Rickard Rakell up to the top line in Gensel's place, and there's no real sample for that line, obviously, for this season because Gensel and Crosby have basically been attached at the hip. But over the last couple seasons, over 200 minutes without Gensel next to him, the Crosby line shot attempt rate goes down 32%. That is a lot. Jake Gensel is a really, really good player. Obviously, Sidney Crosby still having a great season. He can kind of float anybody. But, that Chicago Dickinson line is a good defensive line. The Chicago penalty kill is not that bad either. I'm going to be honest. I'm not super excited about playing Pittsburgh 1 and then Pittsburgh 2 with Puljujarvi there. I think they're playable. Smith and Puljujarvi. Puljujarvi's min price on DraftKings. Smith is 3,700. So you put the two of them with Malkin, it's a little over 12K. I think I prefer Pittsburgh 2 here to Pittsburgh 1, honestly. We just don't know that the Smith, Puljujarvi, Malkin line is going to be a line for sure. And obviously, because of the matchup, they're coming in with pretty heavy ownership. I think if I were to do anything, I would leave Puljujarvi off and just two-man Smith and Malkin. Reasonable chance they're both on the top power play unit, even though that Pittsburgh power play is really bad. But it is that second line that I like better than the top line here tonight, assuming Jake Gensel is out. And again, I think the Connor Bedard, Kurashev, Donato presumed line is perfectly fine. This just isn't a game that I'm super excited to really play either side of. Pittsburgh power play is bad. Chicago penalty kill is not that bad. Chicago penalty power play, even with Connor Bedard, was awful. Pittsburgh has a good penalty kill, doesn't take a lot of penalties. They're going to have to get it done at 5-on-5, so on and so forth. I just don't think this is a game where I'm necessarily looking for stacks. But it is Pittsburgh 1 and then Chicago 2 that I like in that order. All right. San Jose Sharks have a 2.0 implied goal total. They're going to Calgary. Calgary has a 3.5 implied goal total. I'll touch on the Sharks briefly, and it's for this reason. Granlund, Zetterlund, Duclair, only 2.5% ownership, 13K, so they're a filler-type stack. They haven't been that bad. Over 200 minutes together, 2.5 expected goals, 2.7 actual goals per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. At least that's NHL caliber. You can't really say that a lot about the San Jose Sharks, but at least that's an NHL caliber line. I just think on a road back-to-back, after getting shut out last night and looking so bad, Calgary has had a great penalty kill, so they'd have to do it all at 5-on-5. With Dustin Wolf starting and not Jacob Markstrom, I guess it's possible. Wolf has had a couple games in the NHL this season. He's been great in the AHL, but he hasn't really stepped up. I guess this is a perfect spot for him to do it. It is the Zetter line, if anything, on the San Jose side, but there's not a lot. I really don't have a lot of interest in playing them unless I was playing 150 lineups. The question is what to do with Calgary, because obviously Calgary is coming in with a ton of ownership, nearly 10% on the Coleman Backlund line, nearly 9% on the Kadri line because they're filler status, even 3% on that top line. Now, I imagine that the Sharangovich, Huberdeau, Kuzmenko line comes in with even higher ownership. That is a line that had some early success together. They're perfectly correlated on the power play. The Sharks generally have a good penalty kill, but their goaltending has really let them down on the PK. I'm going to be honest, if those ownership numbers are anything close to right, it's Sharangovich, Huberdeau, Kuzmenko that I'd have the most interest in. They're going to get depth matchups from San Jose, and there's really nothing to worry about in the depth. They're perfectly correlated on the power play. They're priced as a filler stack, and a perfectly correlated filler stack that could play 17, 18 minutes here tonight with a 3.5 total, coming in at 3% ownership. Even if that ends up 5, 6, 7% ownership, I really don't care. Sharangovich, Huberdeau, Kuzmenko is what I like best in this game overall. If I were to not play them, I would probably just go Coleman, Backlund, Mangiapane. Coleman, Backlund, Mangiapane, 2.9 expected goals, 3.2 actual goals per 60 minutes, going all the way back to January 1st. Even though they're not on top power play, they'll all get 17 to 19 minutes a game. So that would be the line I would go to if I don't want to, go with the cheaper ones. But it is Sharangovich, Huberdeau, Kuzmenko that I do like best in that game. Just, be prepared to see a lot of some fairly high ownership rates because it is the cheap, chalky spot of the slate. All right, we got our final game. We got the Detroit Red Wings with a 2.9 implied goal total. They're going into Vancouver. The Vancouver Canucks have a 3.7 implied goal total. Thatcher Demko, I was going to say Thatcher Demko, but it's Thatcher Demko going for the Canucks. No one confirmed yet for the Red Wings. I assume it's Alex Lyon, but who knows after what happened after that beatdown against the Oilers. Lyon was in net for that. Maybe they want to give him a break. We'll see. Vancouver going back with Pius Suter next to Miller and Besser, and then Lindholm, Pedersen, and Nils Hoglander together. Now, for a team with a 3.7 implied goal total, there's not a lot of ownership coming in on Vancouver here. 2.5% on the Pedersen line, under 1% for the Miller, Besser, Suter line. I did write up Brock Besser in the picks article today. This is not a bad spot for Vancouver whatsoever. Like, there's a reason they have a 3.7 implied goal total. The Red Wings are just very bad, are a very bad defensive team. Going back to Christmas, Detroit is 26th by expected goals against and 31st by actual goals against per 60 minutes. Now, the actual goals against went down because of that game on Tuesday, but the expected goals against were nearly as bad going into that 8-4 beatdown that they suffered on Tuesday night. So this is a pretty poor defensive team at 5-on-5. None of their lines are really that good defensively. The best you could say is that the Larkin line has been league average defensively in a very small sample going back to January 1st. But if that's the best that they could say, there's really not a whole lot going on. So Besser, JT Miller, and Pius Suter coming in with almost no ownership, 17,600. They should be able to get the run of the play. As I mentioned in the picks article under Besser, with Suter there, 32.6 shots, 3.2 expected goals, 4.3 actual goals per 60 minutes. It's been the best iteration of that line this season without Elias Pettersson when they stacked that line for a few games. So I really do like that Besser line. But if people want to go to the Pettersson-Lindholm line, I have no issue with that either. In a pretty small sample, 3.4 expected goals, 2 out of the 3 guys on the top power play unit. Elias Lindholm only has 9 shots in 5 games. Like, yeah, he had 2 goals on the power play in his very first game. Like, good for him, but he's not been creating a lot of offense. Vancouver's second line has been, that JT Miller line has been better at creating offense. So that's the line that I like on that side. For Detroit, I think we got kind of lucky with a couple of DeBrincat goals on Tuesday. This isn't a very good matchup for them. Like, they're not coming in with any ownership. So if you want to play them because they're not coming in with any ownership, like, go right ahead. But a 1.7% top 2 stack for the Larkin, DeBrincat, Raymond line at 18,100. That's not a high percentage chance of success. Vancouver doesn't take a ton of penalties. They're a little bit above average, but nothing extreme. Their penalty kill has generally been very good. Their 5-on-5 play has generally been very good. The Vancouver Pettersson line, 2.9 expected goals against. That's worse than league average, but they're going to go out against the Confer Perron line. They're going to go out against the Rasmussen Kopp line. Like, they're not going to see much of Larkin. Larkin's going to see a lot of JT Miller, and that line has been good defensively this season. So it's the JT Miller line that I like best on the Vancouver side. Nothing for me from Detroit. I'm wondering how long they can kind of keep these lines going, because after the top line, that's just a whole world of hurt. I think you can make an argument that the Detroit fourth line is the best depth line that they have, and that's not what you want when you're chasing down, trying to hold a playoff spot. So JT Miller line for me, if you want to turn to a power play stack and add Pettersson or something, no issue with that. But it's a JT Miller, Brock Besser, Pius Suter line that I like best in that game, and they're not, like I said, not coming in with a lot of ownership with a 3.7 implied goal total. All right, coming up later tonight, 7:30 Eastern, it's the NBA Live Before Lock with Greg and Eric. I believe it's a 3-game NBA slate to round out, the unofficial first half of the season with the All-Star break starting this weekend. So Greg and Eric will be with you at 7:30 Eastern for the NBA Live Before Lock. Let's talk goalies and defensemen. I wrote up Peter Mrazek in the picks article today. 7,100 on DraftKings, even cheaper on FanDuel. What I mentioned about Mrazek is only San Jose has given up more shots than Chicago at 5-on-5 over their last 20 games, and Pittsburgh is 9th for shots per 60 in that span. But Pittsburgh's power play has really been awful with Jake Gensel out, probably out. I don't imagine it'll get a lot better. This seems, with Pittsburgh on a back-to-back, road back-to-back as well, seems like this is not a bad matchup for Mrazek to face a lot of volume, not necessarily on the power play. And his last 10 games, what I mentioned about Mrazek, his last 10 games, I believe every single game has been at least 9 DraftKings points or better, and he only has 2 wins. The shot volume and keeping the goals against reasonable has given him a lot of really good performances. So I like Mrazek here. With Capo Kakinen starting last night for San Jose, I imagine it's Mackenzie Blackwood tonight. I like him for cheap as well. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen at home against Florida. Like, it's a tough matchup against the Panthers, but Pekka Luukkonen has been playing very, very well. He's not too highly priced at 7,500. I don't mind him. Sam Ersson on the road in Toronto is another goalie that I'm looking at. Sam Ersson, one of not expected to allow a lot of goals here tonight. The shot volume should be fine. Sam Montembeault, if you really want to ride the Lightning going into New York to face the Rangers, I think that might be a little bit much for me. I don't mind Joey Daccord here. Shot volume might be an issue, and you always worry about Boston creating a couple really good scoring opportunities off their shots. But it's Mrazek, Blackwood, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, and Jake Ottinger that I like best here tonight. Jake Ottinger would be at the top of my price range. I believe he's 7,900 on DraftKings. It's those 4 goalies. I don't mind Ersson or Daccord either if you want to mix things up a little bit. For defensemen, I think there's a lot of merit to paying up a defenseman here tonight, especially with Roman Josi in a pretty good spot. Cale Makar in that 3-point total obviously is in play. Quinn Hughes at home against a pretty bad Detroit team. Rasmus Dahlin, what could be a high-paced game against Florida, but it's Josi, Dahlin, and then Thomas Chabot that are the top 3 for me amongst the expensive defensemen. Obviously, Chabot running the top power play for Ottawa in a matchup where they could get a lot of power play opportunities. The mid-price range is where my eye was really drawn, and that's where I wrote up Brandon Montour and Jamie Drysdale. Now, Montour, because as I mentioned earlier, Buffalo taking a lot of penalties. He only has 12 points in 37 games, but he's only getting in on 21.8% of Florida's goals over the last 3 years. That number is 44.2%. So obviously, just a little bit of bad luck going on. I think he's going to be a lot more productive down the stretch. This is a good power play spot for him, so I don't mind Montour. Don't mind Jamie Drysdale because, as I mentioned earlier, the Leafs penalty kill, very, very bad. 6th most shots, 10th most goals against over their last 20 games. So not terrible, but certainly not good by any means. Also in that mid-price range, like Jacob Chychrun from Ottawa, Adam Fox, for the top power play minutes against the Rangers, or with the Rangers against the Habs. Miro Heiskanen, and I'll throw Vince Dunn as well. With the injuries on the Seattle blue line, he might have to play a lot of minutes again. He got a lot of minutes in their last couple of games. Tough matchup against Boston, but should get a lot of volume. Cheap defensemen. There aren't a lot of like the not quite punt, but still cheap guys that I like. I think Ryan McDonough is fine. Simon Nemec for New Jersey, he's always in play for me. Certainly Matthias Ekholm for Edmonton with that big 3.7 total. Obviously Tyson Barrie on the top power play for Nashville as well. But there's a lot of sub 3K defensemen that I like. Not a lot, but a handful. Connor Clifton, I believe he had 5 blocks in that first game without Owen Power on Tuesday night against Los Angeles. He's 2,600, played 22 to 23 minutes in that game. So could be a lot of minutes he gets here tonight against Florida. So don't mind Clifton for super cheap. Simon Benoit for the same reason in Toronto without Morgan Riley in the lineup. Eric Chernak, same thing in Tampa Bay without Mikhail Sergachev in the lineup. And I'll say Vincent Desharnais be getting a few more minutes for Edmonton as well. So there are a lot of cheap defensemen. I think this is kind of like not quite stars and scrubs. I don't think there are a lot of super expensive defensemen that I'm heavily considering besides Josi, Dahlin, and Chabot. I think it's more mid-priced and then super cheap that I'm really gearing towards on this slate. Hat trick pick. He was in the picks article. I think it's a really good matchup at home. He's in the latest game on the slate here tonight. Starts at 10 o'clock Eastern. I'm going with Brock Besser. I believe he's on a 5-game goalless streak. I think he snaps out of it here tonight. Brock Besser is my hat trick pick. That'll do it for us here today. Josh hopefully should be back on Saturday. It's going to be a big day of games with no NBA. So come back on Saturday. Click through that affiliate link if you want to come and join Stochastic. I'll drop it again in the chat here. Really appreciate you guys bearing with us as we have to do. We've had to do a couple of these solo shows, but Two-Man will be back on Saturday. Hopefully we can help you win here tonight. Good luck on the slate, and we'll see you all on the weekend.